You wake up. Your jaw throbs. A sharp, blinding pain shoots through your skull. You reach for your phone. You book an appointment. A few hours later, a professional in a white coat numbs your gums. They fix the problem while you listen to soft music. It is effortless. It is painless. Now, strip all of that away. Rewind the clock 15,000 years. You are standing in a frozen tundra. A toothache is no longer an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. How did our ancient ancestors survive without anesthesia, without drills, without dentists? I know what you are thinking. They probably just died young before their teeth could rot, or they walked around with shattered, decaying smiles. But here is the dirty secret. Ancient hunter-gatherers had vastly superior teeth than you do right now. They possessed wide, flawless smiles that would make a modern orthodontist completely lose their mind. Straight teeth, no impacted molars, almost zero cavities. They did not achieve this through magic, and they certainly did not have daily flossing routines. They survived because their brutal environment forced their anatomy into perfect structural alignment. Let us look closely at the skull of a Paleolithic Homo sapiens. Their jaws were wide, their facial bones were massive, they were heavily reinforced, they were perfectly symmetrical. Why? Because their diet was entirely unforgiving. They ate tough, fibrous meats. They chewed on raw, thick roots. They processed dry seeds. Every single meal was a brutal physical workout for the masseter muscles. These are the muscles that connect the lower jaw to the cheekbone. In our ancient ancestors, these muscles were thick and incredibly powerful. This constant heavy chewing during early childhood stimulated immense bone growth in the lower face. The mechanical stress sent biological signals forcing the bone to expand and lengthen. When it was time for their wisdom teeth to erupt, they had plenty of room. There was no crowding. There was no structural collapse. There was no agonizing pain of teeth crushing into one another. Furthermore, the sheer grit in their diet served a crucial purpose. Their food was covered in dirt, sand, and ash from the fire. As they chewed, this abrasive grit acted like heavy sandpaper. It constantly filed down the biting surfaces of their teeth. This might sound destructive, but it was actually a perfect evolutionary defense mechanism. By wearing down the deep grooves and sharp peaks of the molars, they eliminated the exact microscopic valleys where food particles and bacteria normally get trapped. A flat, heavily worn tooth is incredibly easy to keep clean. Saliva simply washes over it and remineralizes the smooth surface. They did not need artificial toothbrushes because their entire diet was a constant, brutal cleaning process. But biology is never perfect. Sometimes things went wrong. Sometimes a tooth cracked on a hidden stone in the meat. Sometimes a rogue infection took hold deep inside the gum. And this is where the truth becomes truly terrifying. They did not just suffer in silence waiting for death. They performed primitive, brutal surgery. Picture a dark, damp cave in what is now Villabruna, Italy. The time is 14,000 years ago. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and sweat. A man lies flat on the cold dirt floor. He is screaming. Several other tribesmen pin his arms and legs down to prevent him from thrashing. There is no anesthesia. There is no sterile surgical equipment. There is only raw desperation. The healer of the tribe holds a flint microblade. It is tiny. It is razor sharp. He forces the patient mouth open. He jams the crude stone blade straight into the infected tooth cavity. He ruthlessly scrapes out the rotting dentin by hand. We know this exact terrifying scenario happened. In the year 2015, a renowned researcher named Stefano Benazzi examined a 14,000-year-old infected tooth found in that very Italian cave. Under a high-powered electron microscope, Benazzi saw undeniable artificial striation, deep, methodical scrape marks inside the cavity. Someone had intentionally excavated the rotting infection using a tiny stone tool. But the brilliance of this prehistoric surgery did not end with the scraping. After the agonizing excavation, they sealed the exposed raw nerve. They packed the bloody cavity with natural beeswax. This was not a random choice. Beeswax contains propolis. Propolis is a highly potent natural antibacterial and anti-inflammatory compound. They effectively created the world-first antibacterial dental filling. It was savage. It was unimaginably painful, but it kept the man alive. This was not an isolated act of desperation. Across the world, in what is now Pakistan, archaeologists unearthed an ancient graveyard at the Neolithic site of Mehrgarh. They discovered 11 teeth belonging to 9 different adults dating back over 9,000 years. These teeth had perfect concentric holes drilled right into the enamel. Some holes were nearly 2 millimeters deep. They used a primitive bow drill tipped with a hard flint head. Imagine the sensory horror of this procedure. You are sitting in the dust of a prehistoric village. A specialist positions a wooden bow over your face. They wrap a string around a central drill shaft. They press the flint tip against your rotting tooth. Then they pull the bow back and forth rapidly. The wooden shaft spins the stone bit at incredibly high speeds directly into your jaw. Modern scientists actually recreated this exact prehistoric tool in a laboratory setting to see if it worked. They discovered that a flint-tipped bow drill can pierce human enamel in under 1 minute. But the intense friction generates an unbearable amount of heat, the burning heat of stone grinding against bone, the absolute sheer agony echoing through your skull. They had no numbing agents to offer you, only the harsh reality that if the deep tissue infection spread to your bloodstream, you would die of sepsis. So you endured the torture. You survived the drill. Yet surgery was only their final desperate line of defense. Their greatest everyday weapon was completely invisible to the naked eye. It was their oral microbiome. In the year 2013, evolutionary biologist Alan Cooper successfully sequenced the DNA extracted from calcified plaque on ancient prehistoric teeth. This plaque, known scientifically as dental calculus, is essentially fossilized bacteria that permanently locks in a microscopic record of everything that entered the mouth. The scientific results were absolutely shocking to the modern medical community. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors harbored a rich ecosystem of bacteria in their mouths. It was incredibly diverse. It functioned as a perfect biological shield against disease. They lacked the specific bacterial strains that aggressively dissolve human enamel. Why? Because they lacked the one specific environmental ingredient that feeds those destructive bacteria. Refined sugar? Their diet consisted entirely of wild proteins, healthy fats, complex fibrous flora. The mouth of a prehistoric human was a balanced fortress. It was impenetrable. The ecosystem regulated itself naturally through constant exposure to a massive variety of natural environmental microbes. The good bacteria vastly outnumbered the bad. They possessed a microscopic biological harmony that we have completely and utterly lost in our heavily sterilized modern world. But the story of their survival intelligence goes even deeper. We have found hard, undeniable evidence that they even understood natural pharmacology. Let us travel back 50,000 years to the El Sidrón cave in modern-day Spain. We are looking at the Neanderthals. For decades, modern pop culture pictured them as mindless, grunting brutes who dragged clubs. We were entirely wrong. In the year 2012, researchers analyzed the calcified dental plaque from a specific Neanderthal male who was suffering from a massive dental abscess. His jawbone shows clear physical signs of severe chronic infection. He was in relentless throbbing pain, but his plaque revealed something astonishing. He was chewing heavily on poplar bark. Poplar bark is extremely bitter and completely useless as a nutritional food source, but it is incredibly rich in salicylic acid. That is the exact active chemical ingredient found in modern aspirin. This Neanderthal was deliberately self-medicating. He knew exactly which tree in the dense forest could numb his agonizing pain. Furthermore, the scientific researchers found traces of a specific mold locked inside his prehistoric teeth, penicillium, the natural organic source of penicillin. This ancient human was using prehistoric natural antibiotics to fight a bacterial tooth infection 50,000 years before Alexander Fleming supposedly discovered penicillin in a modern laboratory. They were incredibly resourceful. They mapped their biological environment perfectly. They used the surrounding forest as their own personal pharmacy. They survived against all odds because they possessed an intimate, hyper-aware relationship with the natural world around them. And then everything changed. The ultimate villain of our evolutionary story finally arrived. It was not a deadly global plague. It was not a vicious apex predator hunting them in the dark. It was a technological breakthrough. It was agriculture. Around 12,000 years ago, human beings made a profound choice that altered the biological trajectory of our species forever. They stopped moving. They stopped hunting wild game across the open plains. They stopped gathering tough, resilient roots. They settled down into permanent clustered camps. They planted seeds in the dirt. They traded their sharpened hunting spears for farming sickles. They began to harvest massive, endless fields of domestic wheat, barley, and maize. History books call this the dawn of advanced civilization. It felt like a monumental, permanent victory for human survival. They successfully conquered the daily threat of starvation. They built granaries. They stored food for the harsh winters. But this perceived victory was actually a catastrophic biological defeat. Enter carbohydrates, soft, mushy grains, boiled porridge, baked bread. These new agricultural staple foods required almost zero physical chewing. the necessary mechanical stress on their jaws vanished overnight. Suddenly, human jaws stopped growing to their full biological potential. The underlying bones physically shrank. The facial structures became dramatically narrower with each passing generation. But their ancient genetic blueprint stubbornly kept producing the same exact number of large adult teeth. The unavoidable result was a spatial nightmare, a horrific anatomical traffic jam occurring right inside their skulls. Teeth violently crashed into each other as they fought for limited space. Wisdom teeth became permanently impacted, trapped beneath the gums, causing chronic, agonizing pain. But the shrinking, narrow jaws were only half the tragedy. The real devastation was microscopic chemical warfare. Carbohydrates break down rapidly into simple sugars inside the mouth, and there is a specific opportunistic bacterium called Streptococcus mutans. It thrives entirely on sugar. Before the agricultural revolution, this specific bacteria was an incredibly rare, harmless resident in the human mouth. After they started farming, it exploded into an unstoppable global epidemic. Streptococcus mutans feasted on the sticky residual grain paste trapped between their newly crowded teeth. As it frantically consumed the massive influx of sugar, it excreted pure acid as a biological byproduct. This powerful acid continuously washed over the teeth. It ruthlessly dissolved the tough outer enamel. It ate straight through the softer dentin. It exposed the highly sensitive inner nerves to the open air. For the very first time in hominid history, widespread rampant dental decay swept through entire human communities. When archaeologists examine skeletons from these early permanent farming settlements, they see a horrific sudden surge in dental decay. Rotting teeth, blackened roots, hollowed-out skulls. The agricultural revolution gave them a predictable food supply. It gave them massive cities and written language and sprawling empires. But it absolutely destroyed the human mouth forever. We built modern civilization on endless fields of grain. We split the atom. We put robotic rovers on Mars. We extended our overall lifespans by entire decades. We consider ourselves the absolute pinnacle of evolution. But look deeply in the mirror. We are physically weaker than the ancient ancestors we casually dismiss as primitive savages. We spend billions of dollars every single year on metal braces, painful root canals, and synthetic titanium implants. We endure all of this just to desperately mimic the flawless dental architecture that a prehistoric cave dweller received absolutely for free. You sit completely helpless in that padded dentist chair. You open your mouth wide under the blinding white surgical light. You willingly pay a fortune for the rare privilege of fixing a disease that our own advanced civilization created. You wake up, your jaw throbs, you reach for your phone, you book an appointment,